Hi everyone and welcome to Detect Decoded. This is a video that will show you how to securely access your EC2 instances without exposing them to the internet and doing it with AWS tooling with Amazon SSM in the most secure manner. So let's get started. All right, so now we are in AWS console in VPCs and I will do my demonstration on the default VPC and we'll do all the modification just to show that you can access a private subnet securely, and you can access instances in an isolated subnet also in a secure manner. So I'll start going step by step, doing the modification to the VPC, then we'll launch EC2 instances and we'll show how to connect to them. So here you can see this is the default mapping of the VPC, which contain the three subnets that are routed to the default route table and into the internet. So what we'll do now, first we'll create a new private subnet that will have only outbound traffic using a NAT gateway. And we also create a new routing table to make a subnet isolated completely from the internet. And we also will see how we can access an instance that is in an isolated environment. So let's start. I'll create first a new subnet, which will be the private subnet on the default VPC. I'll place the AZ indication just to prevent having inter-AZ traffic, so I won't have any additional cost accessing NAT gateways. We'll make it a small subnet. And I will create two new route tables, one for the private and one for the isolated. And now I will associate it to the private, the newly subnet that I created. And for the isolated, I will take another subnet. Oh, sorry. Not in A, in B. And now, in order to make the private accessible to the internet, I'll create a NAT gateway. I'll select the public and allocate a new IP address and create the NAT gateway. I'll return to the route tables. I'll edit the routes, and I will add an internet route using the NAT gateway that I've created. So if I'll go now to my VPC and see my resource map, I'll have the public one routed to the internet, the private route routed to the NAT gateway, and I will have my isolated subnet into the isolated route table. I'll modify the names on the route tables so it will be easier to see it in the map. So this is the private one. Let's edit it. And this is the isolated one. We will edit it as well. There's a lot of ways doing it, but this is a simple one. All right, let's see how it looks. So now I have my private subnet that is routed to the subnet, the route table, which is private as well, which is routing to the internet, but there's no inbound traffic to the instances, and I can't access them as in public instances in public subnets. Also, I have the isolated one, which is in the isolated route table, that if we look on the isolated route table, we will see that there is no internet at all. All right, and another thing, as I mentioned, we are going to use SSM, and with an isolated subnets, we do need to create endpoint for SSM to allow access from the EC2 to the endpoint and back. So let's go to endpoint. Let's verify the AZ that I want to attach it to. It's B. So we'll go to the endpoint. I'll create two endpoints. One is SSM. I'll attach it to the VPC, but only to the B subnet, which is the isolated one. And let's create first the security group, so I will be able to allow HTTP traffic from the CIDR. So let's go to the security groups. This is the page of the security groups. I'll create a one for default private security group. I will even not put any inbound rules in it, only outbound. It will be attached to the private. Let's call it demo private, just for simplicity. I'll create another one, which is demo isolated. And I will give it a rule only for HTTPS access to the CIDR. I don't remember the CIDR. Let's edit it just in a second. So it's 172.31. Let's go back, edit inbound rule, and allow HTTPS to the CIDR block. So now I have a security group ready. I can create my endpoints for the isolated access. To my default VPC, to my isolated subnet with the isolated security group. And I'll create another endpoint for SSM events. SSM messages, sorry. Attach it to the VPC, to the isolated subnet with the isolated security group. And in a bit, they will be available. Next, I'll go to IAM. Of course, you can do it with API, but here I'm creating a new role that will be for an EC2 profile, and I'm choosing one of the wizards of EC2 role for AWS System Manager, which is a SSM. This is the managed policy that allow SSM to access the instances. I will call the role demo EC2 SSM access. And we'll create the role, and we're done. So now, if we'll go to the console, make sure to refresh, we can see that I have a private subnet and an isolated subnet, which I'm going to launch instances without any SSH keys, and I will show how to access them using SSM. All right, so now we'll start launching the instances in the appropriate subnets, and we'll see how we can securely connect them using SSM. So I will first launch an instance on the private subnet. I won't give it even a key pair, so I don't want any unsecure SSH access to the instance at the moment. I'll choose the private one, the private subnet, with the appropriate security group, private security group. And important thing to remember is to put the appropriate role that we just created to allow access using SSM. We'll create another instance, which is the isolated. No SSH key, isolated subnet, isolated security group. And because I modified a default one, I will have to remove the assigning of the public IP because it's an isolated instance. I don't need any public IP. And let's add again the SSM access and launch the instance. Let's see my running instances. All right, so I have two instances. One is in the private subnet and the other is in the isolated subnet. So in order to connect, I need to wait until status checks will pass, and I'll show how I can connect using SSM. So of course, what we need is to have AWS CLI configured, and we need also to have SSM helper according to the docs, will I share in the links in the description below. But after I'm doing a complete setup for those connections, I'm able to use AWS SSM commands in order to connect to the SSM, to the instances using SSM. So let's see, my private instance is up. I'll take the instance ID. I'll run the command SSM start session with the region. And the target, and I'll start the session. And here you can see that the session is started. It also being logged in CloudTrail for security. If I'll check who is the user, then you can see it's the SSM user. And of course, I can move into EC2 user or even become root. Sorry. And I'm root. If we'll go back to the EC2 user, you can see that there is no authorized key in authorized keys, and this is the most secure way to do. To prove that it's a private instance, I can reach the internet, but I don't have any public IP, and no one can access this instance without using SSM. All right, so I'm logging out, and now my session is ended and logged in CloudTrail securely. And let's try doing it with the isolated one. Remember, the isolated one doesn't even have any access to the internet. And let's see if I can connect to it. So, yep, you can see that I'm connected. I can move to become my EC2. Let's be root. And this is a private subnet, so I can't isolated subnet, so I can't go to the internet. Nothing will happen. I can't update my instance. Nothing will work as it isolated. So the most important thing to understand here is I'm not using any VPN. I'm not using any long-term connections. I'm just connecting using SSM with the allowed access and IAM role in order to reach the instance. Next, we will see how I can connect to the instances for remote development from VS Code. So now let's see it in action. What I will do, I will open VS Code. I will install the remote SSH extension. Great, and let's add a new SSH host and just paste the command here. Use the default SSH and let's connect. First login, so I need to add it to my known hosts. And there it is. I'm on the local host on my Mac, from my Mac to the EC2 instance. Here is the instance. Let's see that it's the same. I'll open another SSM connection. And you will see we're talking on the same host. It's 100.238, 100.238, and you see that the user connected is SSM user, and I'm on the same machine, and now I can securely develop over SSH tunnel that is over SSM tunnel from my local machine easily and without any exposure to the internet. And that's it. So what we've seen today is how I can use SSM to effectively and securely connect to instances in the cloud using SSM, both when an instance is a private instance that has only outbound internet connectivity, or even to an isolated instance that is located in an isolated environment. So let's wrap it up. This is the Tech Encoded. This is my first video. I hope you enjoyed it. Like and subscribe. Add comments and questions. I'll happily answer everything. And on my next session, I will show how you can leverage connecting to remote instances via SSM with port forwarding session to connect securely to databases. Thank you and have a good one.